All right, so before we start and I hand it over to Nathan to facilitate, just wanted to give a little bit of introduction for both Sato and Daytheon. Excuse me. I would first like to introduce Sato, PAC. He's a recent graduate of the Duke University class of 2020 and future ERPA. He was a six-time applicant to PA school. Over his 6 years of applying, he applied to 29 different programs and submitted approximately 70 applications. He was rejected 69 times and accepted to only one program. Sato created an Instagram account to help pre-PA students attain their dreams. Having been a reapplicant, he understands the ups and downs associated with applying to PA school. If he can prevent one person from giving up on their dreams and making it to PA school, he would consider that a success. Thank you so much for being here, Sato. And I would also like to introduce Daytheon Sturges, PAC. He has been a PA since 2008 and a PA educator since 2013. He's an assistant professor at the University of Washington MEDEX Northwest PA program, also serving as the Associate Program Director of Regional Affairs, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, or JEDI, while maintaining clinical practice in family medicine within the UW system. His passion is providing care to underserved populations. He serves as the chair of PAEA's Diversity and Inclusion Mission Advancement Commission as a Faculty Skills 101 workshop facilitator, and as the Cultural Perspectives editor for the Journal of Physician Assistant Education. He is currently embarking upon the dissertation phase for his PhD in health studies at Texas Women's University, where he also completed a postmaster certificate in interprofessional informatics. His dissertation is studying perceived burnout in underrepresented minority PA educators in the US in order to inform future health interventions. He was recently awarded the 2020 PA Foundation Brightman Dorn Research Fellowship. And thank you as well, Daytheon, for being here. I now turn it over to Nathan to facilitate our discussion.
Hi, Daytheon. Hi, Sato. I really appreciate you guys being here. We'll do this discussion. We have about 7 questions. If we have some more time, we might throw in a couple more, depending if you guys are willing. We'll have about 6 minutes or so per question, and that can change depending on how long it takes for each question to be answered. So we'll start with the election just recently passed. And Joe Biden was elected president-elect, which is a plus for all of us, I believe. So how do you think the results of this election will affect the BIPOC individuals in the PA profession and those that are looking to go to PA school?
Are you going to ask? Do you just want to?
I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask you, Dave. You can go first.
Okay. So let me preface this that I'm speaking as Daytheon Sturges, not as any of those other things that you mentioned, okay? So if I go off script, it's Daytheon talking. It's not the other person talking, okay? So how do I think the election will affect the BIPOC population in PA education? That's the question, right? Okay. So honestly, number one, hopefully one of the executive orders is to overturn Trump's executive order when it comes to diversity and inclusion training being anti-patriotic, so that we can continue the conversation, which we will regardless. I will be honest to say that, I told my dean at UW that I'll be fired before I stop doing this work. So that's going to continue. But I think overall on a humanistic level, morale, I hope, will rise. But it's not about just the person who's occupying the White House. Yes, they have their figurehead, but also we have to still realize that who is in the Senate, who's in the House of Representatives, who is sitting on the Supreme Court. So we can't be complacent. It is a great win for us. The air feels thinner. I feel good. I was out social distancing partying last night in my neighborhood with everyone else, but I still have to realize that we still have to be advocates and make sure that we keep this good work going in order for things to change. We experienced a lot of change during the Obama years, I affectionately call them, but you can see how quickly that can change depending on who is occupying Capitol Hill. So I really encourage all of us to be political. I really feel like medicine is political, because if we're not advocating for the patients that we serve, then we are failing our patients in those communities. So we need to be out spreading our voices, shouting loud, and really just doing the work. I'll probably repeat that throughout this whole time. It's one thing to say and talk and want, but it's another thing to do. And so, that's why I'm glad this group has convened, because, there's power in numbers. Our voices can amplify when there are more than one voice talking. So I really feel hopeful in this transition for our community. However, let's be honest, there's still division in this community too, if you look at the poll numbers and the people who are voting for who. So we can't be blind to what's going on, but we can have our eyes open and be on the ground running and continue doing this good work.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what Daytheon just said. One part I will disagree with is, standing up for people's rights. It's not a political statement. It's nothing about that is political when we're advocating for our patients, people, of the BIPOC, committee. There's nothing political about it, in my opinion. And so it shouldn't be something where we feel uncomfortable bringing it up, right? It's just one of those things that we have to continue to fight. Like, sure, we got, Joe Biden as the president-elect, but that's just one step, right? I mean, we've been promised many things throughout history from politicians, and it's up to us now to make sure that they follow through, right? They promised us a lot of things, but now it's up to us. We have to hold them accountable. We have to say, hey, you promised us, A, B, and C. This is what you campaigned on. This is why we voted for you. Our advocacy isn't done quite yet. And I think, like, we were talking about getting Joe Biden into the presidency. We have Kamala Harris, the first female Black Asian vice president in the history of the US. I mean, that in itself kind of it breaks, I think not quite breaks, but cracks a psychological barrier that we may have on what our ceiling is. Right? It's not just Kamala Harris. It's, we may have Andrew Yang somewhere in the presidency's cabinet, right? That's an Asian that we have in somewhere higher up, right? We have people of color being represented. We're going to have, more voices in the president's ear. And so I think it's just one of those things where we just have to keep pushing for it. Our work is nowhere near being done yet. It doesn't end with Joe Biden getting there. Like Daytheon said, I mean, almost 50%, 47% of the people, voted for Trump, which means we are very much divided, 50-50, right? So we got to continue. We got to continue having these conversations, and we have to push together, not as, the Black community, the Hispanic community, the Asian community, the white community, the LGBTQ plus community, but as one community. We need to push together and push forward.
So
For sure.
I need to challenge you just 1 second.
Yeah.
The reason why I say it's political, it is when you have to think about the social determinants of health as well, and the social ecological model of how things are. Policy level is where the change happens, and in that advocacy, we have to include some politics in it, because we have to change these antiquated laws and rules that may be rooted in racism and things like that. So I agree with you by saying you don't be fearful of it, ever. Don't be fearful of it. But in your advocacy, we have to try to change policy. And that's where it gets to the political level.
Actually, do you mind, Nathan, if I ask a follow-up question?
No, go for it.
Yeah. So when, people, a lot of time when you try to bring it up in a workspace or in school or amongst people, they're like, I don't want to get into a political debate, right? So how do we address it so that, yes, I totally agree what you just said, right? We need advocacy, we need further improvement at a political stage too, but I don't know, kind of putting it as a political, but kind of, how do you work around someone that says, I don't want to have a political debate with you?
So the way that I do it is, and Alexandria probably can attest to this, is that being human is not political. Having uncomfortable conversations are not political. Social justice ain't fair. When people try to say, let's not make it political, everyone needs to be equal. No, we're not talking about equality here. We're talking about equity. And there's a big difference here. And we're not talking about being fair either. equity isn't fair. Equity is putting everybody on the same level. If that means I'm standing on 3 boxes and you're standing on 1 box to look over the fence, let's talk about removing the fence, not giving us boxes to look over, So I always tell people, I was like, when we talk about social justice, it ain't fair and it's not political. And if you want to label it that, I think people it's a misnomer, I think. And that's a cop-out, like you said, Sato. I think people use that to dampen or put a damper on the conversations. Like, oh, let's not talk politics. That's not appropriate. But human rights, let's talk about that then. That's how you can reframe the question. I'm one of those people. I'm from the South. I'm from Louisiana, even though I'm in Seattle, and we have a mouth on us. At least I do. And I don't care what you think or what you say or what you do. You can't really do much. We can disagree and you can not listen, but then what else? So I do want people to be brave in that thing. It's hard to get to that level. I'm not going to lie. I haven't always been so outspoken at all. But living and learning and having to fight for people, you have to do it sometimes. You just have to be bold in it. But yeah, so this conversation, I like that. I like this kind of back and forth clarifying things. We're on the what's the war room on CNN.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we do have to move on to the next question here. So what would you say is the most or was the most difficult challenge that you faced as a BIPOC provider in your career so far? And for you, Sato, either in trying to find a job or in PA school?
I mean, for me, it's pretty easy. I mean, I've being an Asian provider and Asian worker all the way up until pretty much March of this year has been, for lack of a better term, relatively easy. I mean, sure, I worked in Inglewood, California, for about 4 years, and sure, I faced some, racist slurs from our patients there quite frequently. But I think it wasn't until March when coronavirus started, when I had patients that would flat out not want to talk to me, have people that, would be okay talking to my preceptor who would be non-Asian, having a conversation with them, having them examine them. But me being Asian, they didn't feel comfortable. Sometimes it wasn't directly said, but body language speaks volumes. And when you can tell that someone's uneasy with you being in the room, then that was quite hurtful. And like I said, I was privileged to be able to live 30 years, right, and work in medicine for the last 8 before PA school, to not have to deal with that ever in my life until this past March.
I'm sorry for your experience, and I hope that it passes. And how about for you, Daytheon? What is the most difficult challenge that you've faced in your career?
Let's see. So I first started my practice in Louisiana, a small town in central Louisiana. In the beginning, sometimes, just because of the hue of my skin, I know, like he said, that you could sense that people are uncomfortable. But I actually started inviting people to tell me if they didn't want to be seen by me, actually, because it's not going to do any of us any good. And I finally had one woman who was brave enough to say that, no, I don't want you to see me. And I said, may I ask why? And she was like, I'd rather not say. And I was like, okay, fine. And I was like, feel free to always don't be uncomfortable. So I just got somebody else to see her, But I want to say, like, how people judge people. So in that same hospital, I had a patient who was a former KKK Aryan Nation person, had all the tattoos, Nazi symbols, all this stuff on him. And the nurses were like, hey, let me tell you about this patient. He's no good, this and that. And I was like, okay, I'm still going to see him because this is what I took a Hippocratic oath. I'm going to see him. So I walk in, I'm doing an exam, I'm touching him. And this man begins to weep and cry. And I'm like, what's up? He was like, you're the first person that touched me since I got here. He was like, everyone's been so mean to me. And he was like, and I was like, I'm here to give you some good care. And he was, and it kind of makes me cry even when I think about it, because he said, you know what, I used to be in this organization. I used to do bad things. He said, but now I know what it feels like because I'm not in that anymore. And but my skin, people are judging me by my skin because he has all those tattoos and the Nazi symbols. And he said, you know, and I was like, well, you know, even if you did, I wouldn't treat you like that. And I went and told the nurses, I was like, don't judge this man by what his skin, you know, what's on his skin. It was just a perfect like analogy to what was going on, like how people judge me and how he used to judge people, you know. And I always take that and share that story. Um, Luckily, I've always been with my tribe when I practice medicine. I practice really underserved medicine, minority medicine. Either I have a large Black and Mexican population or just an immigrant population, which, you know, even on that regard, even though you don't share the same race, which is a social construct, you still share kind of similar experiences and people are just happy to have you around. So I would say I've been blessed in the regard that I have maintained being around my tribe, but it's been purposeful though. And I guess another challenge I had, I don't think it had anything to do with me being just a member of a URM population. It was just me being a PA. I had a doc I worked with once that would put possessive words on me, like my PA and this is Daytheon, he works for me and things like that. And I would correct him in front of the patients because that's undermining my care. Because then the patient be like, when's the doctor coming? Well, he's not coming. So we had a riff and I left, but that was another thing. So I wanted to bring it up too. So when you do go out into practice, and when you're just talking to MAs and nurses, don't call them mine. They don't belong to you, you know, or call them by their names because no one belongs to you. And that's so important to me. And I didn't realize that until I was called, like I was owned. And then maybe that was a trigger too, knowing that my ancestors were owned and belonged to people. And so I wasn't going to belong to anybody, and I let it be known.
Right. I mean, that's 100% true. I mean, I think as a PA student, one of my first rotations, I went with my preceptor, who was a doctor, and we both went in the room, and he introduced me as his colleague. You know, he didn't say, this is my student. Oh, this is a PA student. No, he said, this is my colleague. And I went to him and I was like, you know, you're the first person that's called me a colleague. And he's like, well, I mean, you are. Right? You're not my student. I don't own you, right? You don't work for me, right? It's not like I own you and you're working for me and you're just doing everything I want you to do. He says, no, you're a colleague in medicine. When you're done with PA school, you're still going to be my colleague. So I might as well introduce you as my colleague now. And so it definitely gives, it's, you know, being a nervous first rotation PA student, you know, it definitely alleviated a lot of stress right off the bat and just knew that, hey, you know, we're in this together and we're a team.
Yeah. I totally agree with what you guys are saying, and especially with the MAs and like feeling that possession where, you know, in the past, someone would say this is just a CNA or this is just a nurse aide or whatever, and nobody's just done anything. Everybody has to come together to do the service and provide the patient with the best care. So always remember who you're talking to, and everybody's valuable. So the next question is, when you're interviewing for PA school or jobs, what did you ask to ensure that the program or the clinic shared your views and would be supportive in you and your environment? And we can start with Daytheon on this one.
Okay, so interviewing for PA school, that's one of those, I wish I knew now what I knew. I mean, wish I knew then what I know now. So back then, you know, I've been a PA for a while. I only applied to one school and, you know, I had one interview and one shot, you know, that's blasphemy now, I know, you know. I went there just being myself though. I just remember a question, I guess they were scrutinizing my transcript. And one of the questions was, why did you make this C in biochemistry? And I was like, I just did. Like, I was like, I can't offer you an excuse. And he was like, oh, okay. He was like, I like that. And I was like, okay. You know, and then he was like, what's your favorite book? No, what's your favorite show on TV? And I said, Family Guy. And he was like, wow. Then he just kind of stopped and was like, you know, you're the most genuine person we've interviewed today. Everyone wants to say ER or, you know, trauma, this, you know, this. And he was like, I like that. And he was like, what's your favorite book? And I told him like about Maya Angelou, but he was like, people are saying like the Bible and, stuff like that. So just, I think one thing that worked for me was that I was just being myself. And I always tell people to speak from their heart, not their heads. I know you have this elevator speech prepared, but you need to just throw that out, and so you don't have any regrets. So at the end, if you get in, if you don't, you know that you brought yourself and you don't have any doubts or regrets for anything, right? When I'm interviewing for jobs, number one, I pick jobs that I know that my patient population is going to be diverse. I really like working with uninsured and underinsured patients so that I can provide that access. My current job is within UW, which is not the safety net hospital. But my patient population is still pretty diverse, but I just want to make sure that, we are not just trying to meet a bottom line, that we're trying to actually help patients. I've had experience when I've worked in private practice and put the public sector. I prefer the public sector because I don't like being restricted on the care I can give patients. Because you're being reimbursed $6, I can't give the antibiotic shot that they need. I don't like that. So I guess my advice is to align your values with the value of the place you're going to be working with. And then when you get there and they gave you a good game and it doesn't align, leave. You have your life to live, and you are a PA that's flexible, can go anywhere. You won't be hurting for a job ever. So don't ever stay somewhere you're not happy, and don't feel guilty about leaving, because that's what people do. I know that sounds harsh, but I don't ever want you to be wrapped up in something that you're not happy in. So that's my little spiel. I think that Sato will have some good insight on the current job search.
Yeah, I mean, like Daytheon, this really wasn't something I thought of. Like I said before, I was blessed that I didn't have to have these kind of conversations with people, because, I grew up in Virginia when I was young. I remember, I moved there when I was 4 months old. I still have vivid memories of, the racism I felt or experienced in Virginia, even up to when I was 6 years old. I moved to, Ireland after that, where my entire school was white. I was the only Asian kid in my entire school, other than my sister, where I literally faced no racism at all. Like, I can't remember a single incident where they were racist towards me. And this is an entire school of white kids. Well, actually, they're all Irish, except for I think one kid in my class was Russian. But I can't recall a single racist incident. And then I come back to California, where we're supposed to be one of the most diverse populations out there. Ton of racism. I mean, constantly. So, it's one of those things where I think I just learned to block it all out. So I didn't have to think about it. Never thought about it during any of my interviews. Never asked, schools like, oh, so what kind of support do you give, people of color or people like myself? Really what I looked for in programs was, do they have Asian people in their class? Was one of the things I looked for, just because I wanted people that, looked like me in my class. And so we'd have, some kind of a shared experience. Even though Asian cultures are, drastically different from different country to country, we still have some overlap and some kind of feeling that, we belong together in a certain degree. So that's unfortunately stuff I didn't really ask about. What do they do? How do they react to coronavirus and, their Asian students facing, discrimination and racism? What do they do during Black Lives Matter? Like, how did they address the issue amongst the faculties themselves, but B, the students, right? Did they have Zoom meetings? Did they address it? What are their plans going forward, right? If something happens where there's another incident of police brutality, again, what is their plan to address that? If there's some kind of anti-Semitic thing that happens on campus, what is their plan to address that? If there's some anti-Asian, anti-Hispanic, anti-LGBTQ, whatever is anti-fill in the blank, I want to know what their plan is going forward. How are they going to address it? First, amongst themselves. Second, amongst the students of that community. And then third, amongst all the students as a whole in the class, and how that's going to be addressed and how they're going to make the students feel welcome. That's what I would ask now. And if, if they say they did everything perfectly, then I would question that. If they said, oh, there was absolutely nothing we did wrong, we did everything so great. This was, not to quote some idiot that used to be in the office, but we did the greatest job of all time. No one has ever done it better than us. Then I'd be like, well, that means you are absolutely complacent with what you did and you don't think there's any room for improvement. And as a healthcare professional and someone that works in medicine, we should never feel like we are perfect, right? There's always room for improvement. There's always a different point of view to look things at. So that's what I would say in terms of school. In terms of work, I didn't actually interview at any places. I worked in an ER for an ER group for about 7 years before PA school. One of my good friends is the associate director of the ER. So it was pretty much, I graduated, I texted him, I said, hey, I'm done. I'm coming home to work for you. And the reason why I chose Inglewood, California is it's an underserved population. For those of you that have never heard of Inglewood, if you heard of Compton, if you heard of Long Beach, kind of similar population of pretty much 95% Black, Hispanic, lower socioeconomic status, people that really need our care. And having worked there for so long, there were times where as ER providers, our job is really putting people in 3 boxes, right? Is it discharge, is it OBS, or is it admit the patient? And, when people are getting discharged, I really felt like sometimes people just punt them out, no real help. There's no way to get them help. You can clearly tell that they're we failed at doing our patient education and helping them out. And so I felt, the place where I could have the biggest impact is in this ER where, I'm going to do my due diligence, find, what primary care facilities are out there that take uninsured patients, low copays, people that, they'll accept patients that can't afford their care, and then try to refer my patients there rather than just saying, hey, here's your discharge paperwork, go see your primary care doctor in 2 days.
Thank you.
Just one thing quickly. So like so be careful too because the buzzword of the century now is diversity in people's mission statements. Look at the composition of the class if they want it, and look at the faculty. If the faculty isn't diverse, you might want to think again, because if that's not diverse, then the class might not be diverse, and you might not have people that know how to handle issues that arise with different populations too.
Yeah.
So, optics are important. So I would say check out the website, look who the faculty and staff is. If you can find pictures of students, look and see what they have. And just like with MedX looked one way forever. But I'm happy to say that that's changing, because the faculty actually diversified heavily. And that brings in, a diversity of thought, and also looking at different lived experiences too, which opens the doors for more people from very, very backgrounds as well.
Right. I think just be very specific with what type of diversity you're speaking of, right? You can use the word diverse and you can have an entire class of the same ethnic or racial group and still be diverse because of the definition of the word diversity, right? So if you want to know, is this class racially diverse? Then just ask them, do you guys have racial diversity? Don't throw out the term diversity, because they can be like, oh, yeah, we're absolutely diverse. And then you find out later that it's really racially, it's not diverse, but you might have, different upbringings, different backgrounds, religious diversity and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So next, we're going to say, how would you advise students to bring up concerns of harassment or racism when they're on clinical rotations? And should it be done at the preceptor level, or do you go straight to the school? What would you suggest students do if they catch themselves in that situation?
You go straight to the school. There is a power gradient that exists. So you need to let us fight that battle. That's why you got to be at the right program too. If that happens, number one, we should have you all in a space that you're safe and brave enough to even report that. Any type of harassment, sexual harassment, racial harassment, any type of harassment to us. And it's up to us to handle that. And, you know, we are governed by accreditation rules and we have to be in compliance with those. And guess what? If they come for site visits, they interview students too, and students might tell it all, you know? So it is up to us to handle that. I say never sit on anything that makes you uncomfortable. That's what we get paid for. And don't let anybody make you feel any different. We're here to do a job and we get paid pretty well for it. So if you have issues, you come tell us and let us fight that battle. If nothing is happening, you escalate it. You escalate above the program to the dean or whomever. You know, look at your handbook, follow whatever the handbook says. And the handbook is your tool guide and your toolkit. They have things outlined in that handbook that they have to be held accountable for, you know, and if it's not being followed through, then you need to escalate it. There's nothing wrong with that. And as you can see, if you were on the anti-racism town hall too, if you're afraid to do some things, reach out to the DIMAC, reach out to us at PAEA. You know, we might not supposed to be getting in your business, but we did get in some people's business. So you know, that's what we're here for. You don't do it on your own. And if push comes to shove, most likely, I used to be a clinical coordinator before I did this anyway. I would remove my students and I would investigate the site. I wasn't afraid to ever lose preceptors because you don't want that type of person shaping students, and they might emulate that, you know, in practice. So that's my spiel on it. You know, as an educator, you should never ever sit on anything like that. And I know most of us do, and most of us have, but I want to empower you not to put up with that.
I'm actually curious, Daytheon, because I agree, you know, elevating it up to the program itself. But your thoughts on, you know, sometimes asking someone why, like what made you say that? Or, you know, because sometimes people say things, right? And in their mind, it's not racist or homophobic or misogynistic or whatever you feel like, right? So, you know, sometimes asking like, well, what made you feel that way? Or why did you feel that way? Or how do you recommend doing that at all from a faculty perspective? Or
it's a slippery slope with that, but only because I guess you have to know how to gauge the relationship you have with that person too, because there's this thing called power, you know, and that power grading, they might think that you're being disrespectful by questioning them, you know. It just really depends on the relationship. I wouldn't say one way or the other. If you know that you can talk to this person and you can ask them why, then yes. But if you feel a certain way, I don't mind asking that person why, you know. And when preceptors are on board, they really should know that that's the rules. Like if there's any grievance or thing, that conversation needs to be had amongst the PAs and not the student, because too, sometimes people are not don't have a good moral compass, and they might take that out on you later, you know, and try to retaliate. So if we have no clue about anything that's ever happened or transpired between you all, we'll just say, okay, they failed this rotation, moving on. But if we know what's going on, we know how to scrutinize and look at that a little bit differently.
right, because
if they chose to stay.
Right. Well, because I totally agree. You know, elevate it up, but sometimes, you know, when you ask the why, and then it's almost a teaching moment from, you know, someone of color or someone from a different background, to be able to tell them, you know, this is how I interpreted it as, you know, as a member of said community. And, you know, I just wanted you to clarify something like that. I mean, obviously, I totally agree. Being able to gauge whether or not this individual is someone that you can have a conversation with or not is key. But, you know, I just wanted to know what as a faculty member, what your thought process was behind, you know, elevating it up the chain of command, as well as asking them to see if you have an possible opportunity to educate them on why that comment that they made may or may not be hurtful.
Yeah, and you know, that's like I said, I don't disagree with if you can have that conversation. It's just know that it can go one of either way. Either way, I think you're going to feel great for even bringing it up. You know, either way it goes. I guess I always err on the side, because I know I'm an advocate for my students, to just tell me and let the uncle handle it or something, you know. But I don't ever want to take the power out your hands. And I'm sorry I went blank right here. My internet is acting kind of crazy, so I'm just got the camera off just a little while, okay?
No problem. So how, kind of playing on that, how do you navigate relationships with classmates, professors, or preceptors who are politically different than you and are outspoken about it? With everybody, I mean, everybody's allowed to their own opinion, but how do you navigate those conversations and with those people of different opinions?
Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So first off, we really shouldn't be talking about that. But if it does come up, I always tell my students not to engage. I had I had an experience in Texas where we explicitly tell students do not talk politics, do not talk religion, things like that. And this one young lady, she fell into the sand trap and did it on a rotation. The preceptor did not believe in organized religion, did not believe in a higher power. And then they asked her about it. And then she told what she believed in. And then she started getting treated differently, right? And then she came and complained to us and, things like that. And I was like, lesson learned. We told you not to fall into this trap, right? But the way to navigate that is to just say, you know what, though I respect your question, I'm here to learn about XYZ. Can we just please focus on that and just take the focus off of that, because I really, really implore that you please do not ever fall into that trap. And also, again, if someone uses their political leanings or beliefs as a weapon against you too, that's something that we need to know about. We don't want those people in the classroom. We don't want those people being preceptors, but it's going to come up, especially it was election season, right? So it's going to be talked about. You can sit there and listen, just be a fly on the wall, but I would not entertain that. Even as a practicing PA, I still try to stay away from those types of conversations. Sometimes just to salvage relationships, like I don't even want to know, because so sometimes I like eating a sandwich and talking to you, but if I know that, then I probably won't sit down with you anymore. So I always just say, please leave that piece out of it, especially since it's become so divisive these days. But if it's your friends and things, I guess you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. But like if it's a preceptor or a professor or lecturer or something like that, I think that they need to leave that out of the discussion, out the conversation, and you are within your right to divert the conversation if that ever comes your way.
Yeah, I agree. Totally avoiding pretty much all political issues when it comes to speaking to preceptor or professor, stuff like that. Amongst classmates and amongst friends, I find it important to actually be able to have open-ended discussions about, different viewpoints on politics. I'm being a kind of a left-leaning independent. I feel like, I want to understand both sides of the aisle. I want to know what the far left says. I want to know what the far right says. I want to know what the leaning right says. I try to do my best to not have viewpoints when I'm try to have an open mind when I'm listening to them. I listen to a thing like, Brian Tyler Cohen. I listen to him all the time. I listen to, as much as I hate it, I listen to Ben Shapiro all the time, and by listening to Ben Shapiro, 80% of the time, I wrote this in my last post, but 80% of the time I'm like, yeah, this is exactly why I hate you. You annoy the crap out of me and you base everything off of statistics and data and not actual empathy, which as medical providers, we can't do. So, but there's that 20% of the time where I'm like, you know what, that was actually a valid point. And I actually like your viewpoint on it more than I like the left's on it. And so I think you really need to be able to have these conversations. I mean, post-election, we're in a healing period. And part of, the healing period is we need to become unified and not so, divided. And so if there's a classmate or there's a close friend that you want to have these conversations with, I say, obviously respect their opinion, respect that there's certain boundaries, but, try to have an open, engaging conversation with them if you can. If you can't, obviously, some people, it could just be too triggering and just, avoid the conversation altogether if that's the case. Nathan, you're muted.
This next question, thank you for that. This next question kind of plays into what we were just talking about, but how do you address your opinions on political and social issues, whether it be in person or on social media, and to make sure that you're not blackballed from school or clinical rotation sites, because you are allowed to have an opinion. And if you want to do that on your personal sites, is there something you would say or suggest that we do or do not say, or do not get into the conversation at all? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
So for me, if you're a student, you always need to look at what your social media policy says in your handbook, number one. But as someone who is a grown up and who works for a living, I post whatever I want to post, but I'm also a person who has a moral compass. So I'm not going to incite violence. I'm not talking down about my patients. I'm not against healthcare for all, those sorts of things. And number one, I don't tag where I work in my profile either. I work at this place, and I don't tag that. Look at me, I'm in a white coat and I'm at the medical center, because you can say anything and people say, "Oop, they work there. Let me, try to say something." But I'm a wordsmith, and I think if you know me, you know that I know how to say a lot of things without saying it, and that's how I kind of operate when it comes to that. And I operate in right. You can't discredit whatever I've posted either. Like, honest to God, like anything, I'm always advocating for someone, and I might be pointing out the wrong. But prove me wrong then. If you don't agree with this, prove me wrong. But I don't go on there. I don't actually explicitly say people's names. I don't use presidential candidates' names. Even at times when I agree with this current administration, I never use his name, but you knew who I was talking about. It's just kind of ways to do it, because sometimes I'll write something and I'll say, you know what, I do work at a public institution, or I do get state funds, and y'all are paying my salary, so I might reword it into something else. So I just say be attentive, and don't angry tweet or write things in anger. But I always say you can express your opinion and your thoughts, just as long as you're on the right side of history, not inciting violence and name calling and, things like that. So, I don't disagree with what students post in that regard. However, I know we have had students get in trouble for anti-LGBTQ stuff, racist things. You just got to be smarter than that. Not even if you're a student, just as a person, you got to be smarter than that. You might think those things, but if you write it, there can be consequences.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that I heard before in a separate Zoom meeting was, if you have your program that you attend on your profile, in essence, you're representing that program, right? People that see it aren't going to see you as yourself. Like for me, I never put Duke on my program or Duke on any of my posts or stuff like that. I did early on, and I chose to take them all down because I don't want, my program. I don't want people to think that I represent my program. Daytheon said earlier that, what he says today is himself, Daytheon, not any of the corporations he works for, any of the school that he works at, none of that, and I guess it's kind of late now, but, same goes for me. Everything I say is my own personal opinion. It has nothing to do with, Duke Family Medicine. I forget what the whole entire name of Duke University is, but Duke University, the place I work at, the hospital I work for, none of that kind of stuff. So, like you said, just be smart. There are people, like, obviously don't write anything that's hateful towards any one community or any one religion or any, just don't do it, because people are going to take pictures of it and they'll probably send it to your school, and you're going to get in trouble for it. I mean, if you feel it, try to find out why. Ask yourself, why do I feel this way? What makes me feel this kind of disdain or this hate for this certain community or this group of people? If you want, find a friend that possibly has a different viewpoint from you for regarding that, and ask them, well, what are your thoughts on it? This is how I feel. I'd like to hear your opinion about it. Obviously, it's a lot easier when you're outspoken like myself and like Daytheon said earlier, right? It's a lot easier to bring up these conversations with people when you're outspoken and you really don't care what other people like say back to you. So if you're up to it, have the conversation. If not, just keep your thoughts and your feelings to yourself, and don't try to insult or incite any kind of hate or aggression towards another group.
That's right. Because like today on my social media, I posted a wig and I said, "Bye wig." You know what I'm talking about.
I think Daytheon's a lot smarter than me. I tend to just call Trump an idiot. I don't even say Trump's name. I just call him the idiot, is what I say. Like, not president or anything like that. So I mean, I guess I gotta improve how I talk about people without using such negative words, I guess.
So in your guys' opinion, where do you think the most vital advocacy must take place to decrease the systemic racism and increase the number of BIPOC students in the PA profession, education, and ultimately in the profession?
So I put on my teacher hat. Has anyone ever heard of social ecological model? It's like a model that we use to affect change, like in communities. So you got the local level, you have like the community organizational level, and then you have the policy level. So, all those levels are important. And right now we're kind of like, this is a national. So I think I would say organizational at this point. But each of those levels lead up to the policy level. If we don't change policy, then we don't affect change. We can work and spin our wheels all day on the local level and make change for that community. But then what about the people outside of that one community or that 60-mile radius that we've been working in? So I think at each level is very important. And when you can get a seat at the table, that's where you got to keep climbing and scratching up. Once you get a seat at the table, you can affect a lot of change. I would say within the last 5 years, we worked very hard to get the diversity standard for the ARC-PA standards, right? So for diversity inclusion, that an institution must, not should, they have to support diversity inclusion efforts for faculty, students, and staff, and we define it, right? It took about 20 years, but in the last 5 years, it did come to fruition, but it was because we had influence at the top, right? Here at where I work, we are looking right now, my JEDI committee is actually looking at policies from the 70s that we still operate under to see if they're rooted in anti-racism, in institutional racism, and they probably are, right? So we're looking at those and changing those, but you also have to have the people on the ground too that are working and making that local change so that we can create a generation that can continue rising up and making those systemic changes. But if we don't have systemic change, we will kind of keep on spinning our wheels in that regard, just to be honest. And I just want to hear what Sato thinks, and then I can add on if I need to, but that's kind of my thoughts on how to implement like sustainable change.
Yeah, I totally agree about having, to be able to create systemic change, it needs to happen from the top on down. Personally, for me, my focus has always been more local. People always ask, well, like, how are we going to increase diversity in PA programs? Well, we're not going to increase it at PA because I don't want just PA programs to be more diverse. I want to see diversity across all forms of education. So for me, the question isn't, well, how are you going to improve it in PA? Because the problem starts back in, kindergarten, elementary school. We know that there's going to be barriers as people have to overcome, right? How are we going to address those barriers from them, right? It doesn't do any justice if PA programs are accepting, say we have, I think 12% of the American population is Black. If we're accepting 12% of the class is Black, yet they're not passing. If they're dropping out, we didn't do anything to change anything. We accepted, we met a quota, but we haven't actually done anything to change it. Right. So from a PA program standpoint, it's, getting the proper diversity, racial diversity, getting a racial diversity, making sure that they actually succeed. right? Getting them in the door is no good. They have to succeed. You have to help them succeed, right? Whatever they need, you need to help them. And that doesn't just go for the Black community. It goes for the LGBTQ plus community. It goes for the Hispanic community, Asian community, whatever community, right? That's the first step. The second step is, really being able to reach out to middle schools, high schools, elementary schools. I mean, one of my passion projects that I'm really trying to work on is getting a group of a multiracial group of, different healthcare providers, not just PAs, but doctors, respiratory therapists, phlebotomists, being able to go from, schools to schools in the local community and being able to show them, hey, there are people that look like you that are able to succeed. You may have a vision, or you may have, thought that people that look like me never attain higher levels, or there's always this glass ceiling above us and we're not able to break through. But I want to be able to show them that, yeah, no, people like you can succeed. And not only people like you can succeed, but people that don't look like you are willing to come out and help you succeed. And I think that's one of the most important things about, being able to work together is we really have to work together and show people that different communities can come together. Like, as an Asian male, I don't have to help just Asians, right? Daytheon as a Black man doesn't have to just help Black people, right? He can help my community as much as I can help his. So being able to show people that, so that we lift each other up together rather than lifting up our own respective communities only.
Yeah. And I think Sato preached a word when he was talking about having people there and not knowing what to do with them. And because I always ask the question, what is diversity without inclusive practices? You can have us there all day, but not know how to treat us or sustain us, So that's very important. And then when he was talking about going out into the communities, narrative is so important to let people know that I'm just like you. A few years ago, we did a video series called I'm a PA's Just Like You. And we told our stories. Like, I told them that I was the son of a janitor. We didn't have much. Because, a lot of people look at you on the other side and think that you just probably came from some, a silver spoon in your mouth. No, I did not, But this profession can afford you the opportunity to jump socioeconomic classes, but you always have to send the elevator back down when you reach the top. There was a question on how can students affect change or institutional practices. Use your voice, find a collective. Recently, our students did a petition for anti-racism. Just in the wake of the George Floyd murder, Breonna Taylor, they called it out and they made some demands. And those demands didn't stop at us. We sent them to the chair, to the dean, everything. And I think that they're going to be very well pleased to see that when this new class is seated, some of the things that they asked for will be seen. They asked for more black faculty and black faculty in leadership. Well, thank you guys, because I just got promoted to APD. Those sorts of things. So that's how you can make change, because in essence, honestly, I hate when students tell me this or say this or weaponize this, but your tuition is paying our salary. So, so you do have a voice, even though we might make you feel like you don't have one. Yeah, you do. We hate to hear when you weaponize that, but it's necessary. John Lewis said, make good trouble. And that's the kind of trouble I like. And I was so proud. We had maybe 140 something signatures. That speaks volumes. And we listen at that. So you can get you a collective together. They don't even have to just be within the PA program. It could be the school, but we'll hear you. That's how you affect change. You have to use your voice and leverage your capital. Find out what your capital is and leverage it.
Right. Yeah. If your program doesn't have a diversity and inclusion curriculum in place right now, I'd say, yeah, absolutely start a petition. We had one similar where, we spent 3 classes covering the opioid epidemic, and we never had like an implicit biases lecture or anything else, regarding diversity and inclusion. So if your program doesn't have it, start a petition, encourage your classmates to sign it. If your class has, 2 or 3 cohorts, get the cohorts above and below you to sign it, and then submit it to your director. Right. And if that doesn't work, then, if your director is not willing to advocate for you and include these, what you guys petitioned for, then bring it on up higher, right? Find the chain of command. And if it has to go to the dean of medicine of the program, just shoot it straight up to the dean of medicine. I think right now is the time to do it. Don't wait, because right now we have national attention on this, right? If word gets out that so-and-so program shot down a diversity and inclusion class, it's not going to look very good for them. So regardless of whether or not they want it or not, it almost is forcing them to do it. And by forcing them to do it, it's in the benefit of everyone else that is going to end up going through that program.
All right. Well, that's the end of the questions that we had prepared. I do have an additional question, if you don't mind, and then I think there's one question a question in the comments as well, maybe. But with everything with the AMA going on right now and their position on scope creep, how do you guys feel about that and how they're trying to kind of limit the NPs and PAs positions and kind of put it under the guise that it's not providing proper patient care and it's hurting the patients in the long run?
I mean, the research shows that's just not true. I mean, you can say it and scream it and do whatever you want to do, but at the end of the day, that is simply not true. We need to call a thing a thing. If you don't want us, providing being compared to you, just say that. If you want to lead the team, just say that. I see Nasheed on here. He's one of my mentees, and he knows that I did engage the other day on Twitter with some folks, and I never lose, by the way. But they tried, and I was just like, what I pointed out was, I basically said, what's wrong with you? I was like, you are a respected part of the team. What else do you want? We're not doing anything to undermine you. All we're doing is providing access to care. Nobody, I don't care how you paint it, nobody's out there as a PA pretending to be a doctor. That might be, but that's not far reaching, right? You are taught to identify yourself as a PA or as a PA student. The care that we provide is stellar because of the way that it's set up. We usually have more time. We usually are not working for fee for service. Those sorts of things. We're not rushed. So it's a quality improvement thing to me. It only makes sense. Look at the practices and the systems in which you're employed and see how you can do some type of quality change there. That's all I think, And here's the thing too. I've been a PA for about 12 years. I've only encountered one physician that was not on board. Most people these days are trained with PAs. We rotate together. Each other. We value each other. That's one voice talking. And from the comments that I saw, most of the people don't agree with that, including doctors. There's only a few voices that are saying this. And they have like little Twitter accounts, like ghost Twitter accounts where they attack PAs and NPs and CRNAs. Do you think I can sit up and put someone under anesthesia? No. And how long does it take to become an anesthesiologist? A long time. So you need those people to fill in the gaps. You need us to help fill the 35% gap in primary care in this nation. It's just divisive. And I just felt like it was not the right time to bring that up. You had just gotten attacked by the person in charge in DC for, elevating COVID numbers and getting paid more. And you felt away, but then you attacked the people that stood in the gap for you to defend you. It doesn't make sense to me. I know I'm rambling, but it just doesn't make sense. But I pick my battles, and that ain't one of them, because I don't think it's a battle worth fighting, and I don't think it's going anywhere, honestly.
That person in DC, is that the wig, or is that a different one that you're speaking of?
My wig.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you think about it, AMA is the same group that didn't want DOs as part of their group, right? That wasn't even that long ago when they were strongly advocating that DOs were lesser than they are, right? Eventually they had to add them along. And now it's kind of almost like, to me, they're the PPP, the Physicians for Patient Protection, or whatever that one group is. They like to clump all of us together. They love to continue to call us mid-levels, no matter how many times we tell them, that's not an accurate term, nor a term that we like to endorse. And it's just a terrible time. We're supposed to work together, right? Doctors, PAs, MPs, CRNAs, RNs, EMTs, MAs, everyone works together, right? Of course, I missed a couple positions, but we all work together. So why are you trying to divide us right now, right? To me, it just makes no sense. It's a selfish game that they're trying to play to try to incite hate, fear amongst their group so that they can try to get more people to jump on board. Like Daytheon said, a lot of physicians that are coming out now are trained alongside PAs. I mean, when they're in residency, they work with PAs. When they're in rotations as medical students, they're in there with PA students. Sometimes they're even precepted by PAs. So they're very well, not like they know very well that we are absolutely capable of holding our own. The numbers show it. So I think they're just trying to flail at, they're losing their support. I mean, a lot of the people are probably more old head doctors or people that just, feel like they're not respected enough by the healthcare position or the healthcare world and just want to, try to they're power hungry, I guess, in a certain extent. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what more
And I want
to say about that.
Yeah, degree does not a leader make. You just because you have a degree does not make you a leader. That comes with skill, that comes with finesse, that comes with practice, that comes with immersion. And just because you have a degree that you think is a high one does not automatically put you as a leader. I'm just so sorry. The person without the degree can be the leader. Leadership is an action verb. It's not something just given to you. You have to really be a leader. You have to stand in the gap to be a leader. And that's one of the arguments too. Like it should be a physician-led team. Okay, great, but we still have to collaborate. It's a collaborative team, regardless of what you call it. Now we're just getting into semantics. And I really think that's what it's all about, honestly. It comes down to semantics, power, prestige. And most of us, we didn't get into it for any of that. We got into it to be patient advocates and provide good care. Because if we wanted the title, we would have went and got that title.
All right, I hear you on that. On that note, I think that we are going to transition into a open forum. So we'll stop the recording and